Hello and welcome to Transformed. I'm your host, Josh.
And I'm your co-host, Sasha. Hey guys, so we are going to talk about some goals. We're ending the year 2021, which is pretty crazy to say that we are at the end. So as with the new year, I know a lot of people, they start thinking about what the new year is going to look like for them and start planning goals, setting up new goals, thinking of things. So, I think that's kind of where we're going to lead this podcast today. So you want to start us off with some goals that maybe you have?
Yeah, absolutely. I really think goals, I'm a very big goal-oriented person. I really feel that if you're going to have any progress moving forward, that you need goals, right? Because a goal keeps you driven, it keeps you focused. Rick Warren talks about that, where we're focused, right? We're focused on something, we have a task at hand, and we're not just being very empty about what we do. Mm-hmm. So I'm very goal-oriented person. I have a lot of goals. I shared my list with you. I had them broken down to different categories. For me, the big categories are mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional. I feel like if you have for those four categories, you're going to really encompass most of your health, most of your, the areas that you want to focus on in life.
Right.
So the big ones for me, I mean, we all have the cliche physical goals, right? Of either losing weight or losing, for me, like belly fat, or, instead of being in the skinny fat phase, maybe being in, a different phase. But I'd say the biggest ones that are the most important to me are my ministry goals that I have, stepping into more of a ministry role at Oak Chapel. I really want to grow the small group, like the young adult families, the, really that group of people that can really help grow the church. So having a small group can help establish fellowship, can have a different avenue of growth together. I think that's key for Oak Chapel, is getting some more small groups that focus on younger families. So that's my big goal of starting it and seeing if I can get it to grow, or get others in there and they grow it.
And you already have. You've already done an amazing job so far. I mean, it was okay. Just for our listeners, it started out at like what, 4 or 5?
For the youth group portion of it, yeah. For the youth group portion, I mean, when we first started, we had 2 kids.
Two. Okay, yeah.
And I think we're at like 13
That's
right now
amazing.
on our big week, our full week. We get everybody. Yeah, we get like 13 in there.
That's amazing.
It's, I don't know. I'm a believer in that, like, if you build it, they will come. And I think. The same thing for like the small groups. I think kind of a build it and they'll come mentality. So I'm really excited about it. I really think, if we get people in there, they can build relationships. And I think that's the way you grow the church. It's through the side door, right? Through the small group door. They might, they get attached to their friends.
Right.
They kind of grow. They learn about God. They're able to open up a little bit more and worship and fellowship. And then they may be able to check us out on Sunday.
Yeah, so. I love that.
So what about you? What are your goals for next year?
Yeah, so we just got our house a couple years ago. So we're still working and improving the home. And so I think maybe some home improvement things on the inside, which I enjoy. And I've got some furniture pieces lined up that I'm going to start restoring.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm excited about that. I've talked about in this podcast counseling. So I see maybe going back to school, and life coaching is a pretty big field that I'm interested in. And I see that could be a really big tool for, furthering my education. So I'm looking into it, kind of, studying and seeing what's out there. So maybe that could be something that I'll venture into.
Would you focus more on kind of like what your field is now, of just like helping like young women kind of grow and kind of get past trauma and everything?
I do. And I also kind of see maybe employment coaching being a big part of that, because I mean, I have a conviction hanging over my head. So that's always been a big fear of mine, is, like what am I going to be able to do? Who's going to accept me, and not just look at my background and say, oh, no, sorry, we can't do that. We can't work with that. And that's scary. But I really do see employment coaching being a possibility mixed in with women and their, trauma,
Absolutely. I mean, And I'm hoping kind of the pandemic and everything, this extremely long and short year with the pandemic and COVID-19, and there's really been a big employment shortage. So I'm kind of, that would be great if they were able to loosen some of their restrictions. You know, a lot of organizations can loosen that because there are quality candidates out there. And, you know,
absolutely,
if you made mistakes when you're 18 to, 21, if you're 25, 30, you're a different person.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're 30 years old, you're not the same person. At least you shouldn't be the same person that you were at 20.
Right.
So, I mean, I think hopefully they can start loosening up some of those restrictions. That way you can kind of like even grow that more, that coaching them more, because they'll have, you know, they can not just settle for something small. They can actually try to achieve and go something big.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I see a big part of our podcast being a big part of 2022.
Yes.
Growing our podcast and growing our listeners, hopefully double, triple.
That would be amazing.
What we are right now.
Times 10.
Yeah, times 10.
I know, like when we shared our goals list for next year, I know that was one that was kind of a shared goal, something that we didn't talk about what our goals were beforehand before we shared them. And yeah, that like having this podcast grow, I think, you know, whether it's 1,000 people, whether it's, 60 people, it doesn't matter, 50,000 people, whatever the number is. I think what's cool is you and I also both kind of lined up that as long as it helped one person, that would, all the time that we put into it would be worth it. If some person was able to transform, someone's able to change. And so I think that's the big thing, is like the listener, like growing the listener number would be great and would be a blessing, but also having just even one person transform.
Right.
And whether they get saved or whether they just maybe overcome some bad habits or whatever it is, I think that would be the ultimate goal and the ultimate win.
Absolutely.
And I also kind of want like the listeners to know, like, I really think you coming on this podcast and us kind of venturing out and doing this together was kind of a God thing.
Yeah.
I always knew I wanted somebody to do a podcast with and someone to kind of share this with. And, I just had no idea who that would be. And through just kind of conversations, through talking about this, it kind of came together. Like you had a passion for helping out and for wanting to kind of transform the same mentality there of transforming somebody's life and kind of getting in there and helping people. And it ended up just working out. And I really think us working out and having a lot of similar visions on things was a complete God thing. Because how many times can you get two people in the same room and have them agree on so much?
Yeah. Well, in a backstory, for our listeners, we've known each other like, I would say like 14 years. At least.
Somewhere.
Because we were around the age, you were around the age of like 16.
Yeah.
When you first started dating my sister.
Yeah.
So like for those listening, like Josh and I used to have conversations, before recording.
All the time.
All the time, where we would just sit down, where it would be the three of us or, just you and I, we would just talk and we had really good, meaningful conversations. So I think that having this be like, we're together, we're recording this, and it's in the name for Jesus. So
it made sense because a lot of those conversations, I mean, you could almost have a mic in front of there and they would have been a really good episode,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think it made sense because, we had the ability to have just like this long conversation. It would be kind of awkward if we were just sitting here, just him-hawing around, and all of a sudden realizing we have to reveal dark, the skeletons in the closet. But,
right.
Like you said, you've known me, we're both kind of able to be open with one another about the skeletons that we do have, the problems that we've overcame, and we've kind of been there for each other. And I think also a non-judgmental form as well. I think that's kind of went both ways where we both made mistakes in the past and not lived up to the person we should have been. But, I don't think there's any judgment either way, from you to me or me to you. And
nope.
I think that's also kind of reassuring to do this with somebody who is not going to cast that stone, right?
Absolutely.
Who's going to be understanding about, and I think that's what people need to have, is understanding moving forward is, everyone makes mistakes. And if you're making mistakes right now, let's make some goals to not make those mistakes moving on for next year.
Right. So I love that, like you kind of dreamt of this podcast and you started it, from the ground up. So like what season of life were you in that really built this and got you thinking about, podcast?
I think deep down, I always wanted to have some form a podcast, whether I was listening to Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan or any of those other cliche podcasts. I think I always liked the idea of having a podcast, but really it came out of a season of forced rest that I wasn't anticipating. So in the beginning of last year, since we're also talking about goals, it kind of works out that way too. Is my goals last year, January, February, were really to keep losing weight. I'd say that was my main priority. I was overcoming bad habits, but a lot of my focus was still on weight transformation, not necessarily inside transformation. A lot of that stuff was still happening, but I wasn't reading my Bible. I wasn't doing devotions on a daily basis. And cut to February, I was weightlifting and doing something really stupid and lifted way too much weight for my inexperience, and I tore my pectoral muscle. And I was forced to sit, which is something up until that moment, the last 2 years, I really didn't do too much of. And so I think that was big. I was forced to sit down. I was forced to rethink my habits, rethink my routines. And that's really where I started putting God first, having those daily habits and prayers. And that's where the dream came from. I don't really think without having that pectoral tear, I would not have this dream. I really wouldn't have, I don't think I ever would have pursued it. I think I wrote a book, at least it's a rough draft, a very, very rough draft, but that's okay. I wouldn't have the book and I wouldn't have the podcast without that injury.
And I can kind of relate with that too. I had a car accident, 2017, 4 years ago. And, I was in the hospital for 8 days. Wow. And, my lungs collapsed, and backstory a little bit here. I was finishing up my internships. I had switched jobs I was working at TJ Maxx, and I knew I didn't want to be at Moe's Southwest Grill anymore. I didn't want to be in that position. I wanted to move up into something. And I moved on to TJ Maxx, and on my way to work that morning, going to work to TJ Maxx, I hit the back of a truck, and, I was, completely wrong I was trying to make a phone call, ran right into the back of him. So then, in that season, it really did force me to have to sit and just to really think about some things like, okay, so I lost my job at TJ Maxx. They didn't keep me because of the accident. I'd only been there probably a couple months, and, I had to rethink some things. I had to kind of reroute. And I thought the TJ Maxx door was the door that God was kind of leading me into. And turns out that, I actually did have Carmen at the time. We were dating, and I knew he worked for the rescue mission. That's kind of how we met. And there was an opening that he knew about at the rescue mission. So that was a door that opened and unlocked for me through that process. And once I got better and I was healed, able to go back to work, I was able to fill that position. So I really think that was a God thing for sure. Like, yes, I went through a door and he was like, nope, no, this is not your time. And I really need you to I was tired. I was doing a lot, and, I was just exhausted.
Well, you were working, right? The 40, 50 hours a week and going to school, right? Like you were doing everything all at once. So definitely a lot on your plate.
It was. And, so for those listening, doors shutting in your face, it may be a discouragement, but also know that there is something else on the other side of that door that is waiting for you, where you just need to be still and just wait and know that God has got you.
I think that's the hardest part, is just to sit there and try to wait for that opportunity, because a lot of the time we have like blinders on and we're only seeing straight ahead from us, and we're not seeing maybe God on the side, like working out, like, hey, nope, we got actually a lot of side doors over here that are going to be way better for you. Like you said, like you gotta, what your current job is, right? Like your current area that you're working in is all from that. I mean, yeah, I think those side doors end up being a bigger opportunity than the main doors, but sometimes we gotta sit there and be patient and kind of wait and work through a lot of that. I mean, like for me, sitting on the couch was one of the toughest things, but I was actually able to learn a lot of, I lost more weight during that season of rest than I did, the previous 12 weeks on exercising a lot.
Yeah.
So I think it